All right, so let's get you some breaking news that's just come in, where the American President Donald Trump reportedly is holding a phone call with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. The phone call lasted for approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes, and Trump says that he's discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place. Now, Trump says, and I quote him here, "It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to an immediate peace." President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he'll have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. Now, this comes as Putin delivers a furious rejection of Ukrainian peace talks and branded the recent cross-border strikes as an act of terror. He also demanded who negotiates with those who bet on terror. All right, now to give us more details on this, we are joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us from New York over the phone line. Susan, tell us more. We seem to have the very first reaction from Donald Trump, who's held a phone call with Vladimir Putin.
That's right. So as you mentioned, this phone call lasted about an hour and 15 minutes. According to President Trump and his post on Truth Social, it was a good conversation, but he noted that it's not a conversation that would lead to immediate peace. He also mentioned that Vladimir Putin was adamant in responding to those recent attacks inside Russian territory by Ukraine and the bridge in Crimea. It was noteworthy that President Trump said that the two sides also talked about Iran and Iran's nuclear program. There are analysts that believe that the fate of Iran's nuclear program and Russia's support for Iran to a certain extent is tied to how the United States will have to mediate between Russia and Ukraine and whether or not there'll be some kind of off-ramp. So it was interesting that President Trump was very clear in bringing Iran into that Truth Social message, which was about Russia and Ukraine. Mohammed, I just want to let you know that there is a delegation of Ukrainian ministers and deputy ministers visiting the State Department today. So they're here as Vladimir Putin speaks with Donald Trump.
Interesting. Now, Susan, one question that's baffling everyone around the world is the fact that Ukraine was able to carry out this very complex attack inside of Russia. Did the American president, who's been talking about a peace deal, about a ceasefire, was he aware that Ukraine was carrying out an attack of this scale?
The White House says that the United States wasn't aware. So that's according to the White House and White House officials. They've been adamant in that. We do want to note just on the sidelines, and this doesn't mean that Donald Trump was aware or not, but that attack came shortly after a bipartisan delegation, a U.S. delegation, visited Ukraine. If you remember, it was led by Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator, and Blumenthal, who's a Democratic senator. So whether or not the White House was directly involved or not, was aware or not, at least according to the White House, they're saying that they weren't. And we'll just have to take their word for it unless we learn otherwise for now.
Interesting. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us and getting us those details. So this is the latest that's of course come through, where President Trump has had a 1 hour, 15-minute long phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He has said that a number of different issues were, of course, discussed. This, remember, is the very first phone call that Donald Trump has had with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. But remember, Vladimir Putin has put out a statement. He's quite clearly said, who negotiates with those who bet on terror? This, of course, is a big moment in this crisis that simply exploded in an escalation that very few people would have expected. Because remember, now Russia has been pushed in a corner where it has to respond. We do not know what the scale of the Russian response will be, but the fact that Russia's nuclear bombers were targeted in a very complex attack by the Ukrainians using these drones has thrown up a number of different questions. Donald Trump, the American president, has in fact taken the negotiation process on himself. He is the one who had come out and said that, listen, when I'm elected as the president, I can get Russia and Ukraine to negotiate. We'll have peace immediately. With Donald Trump putting his face front and center as part of these negotiations, the question, of course, is this. Was America aware of the fact that Ukraine was carrying out this attack? We'll try to get you this statement that Donald Trump has put out in just a bit for you again. This is the very first reaction by Donald Trump. The attack by the Ukrainians happened on Sunday, and it is today, Wednesday, after his phone conversation that we have this attack. I just finished speaking by telephone with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. The call lasted approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russia's dogged airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks. This, remember, is a crucial and an important moment. Now, Donald Trump says that it was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. So there is going to be a Russian response. The Russians are trying to calibrate what the response will be. But what is clear is this. The Russian president has said, who negotiates with those who bet on terror? Because what has been dented in this almost unprecedented escalation is the prestige of Russia, and the prestige of the Russian president is what has been dented when the Ukrainian drones targeted Russian nuclear bombers. These are strategic state assets that were destroyed in this daring, almost unprecedented attack of sorts. And it now remains to be seen as to how the Russians, of course, respond. But there has been a breakthrough of sorts where the Russian president has had a phone call with the American president. This is the statement by the American president where he said that he had a 1 hour, 15-minute long phone call. But he says that he does not expect this phone call to result in peace.